Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I've ridden solo for nearly a decade. Just me, my bike, and the endless stretches of highway that cut through the outskirts of the city like scars on forgotten land. Most people think motorcycle officers just chase speeders and weave through traffic, but when you're assigned to the edge of civilization, you become the first responder to everything. Wrecks, wildlife crossings, missing persons, and worse. The day it all started was supposed to be routine. I'd clocked in around 6 a.m., rolled out from the station with a thermos of burnt coffee, and cruised south along Highway 19, eyes peeled for the usual suspects. My helmet radio crackled with static occasionally, dispatch chatting back and forth with patrol units across the county. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the asphalt, and everything felt quiet. Too quiet. At 6:43 a.m., I received a call from dispatch that didn't sound like anything I'd heard before. Unit 3-1. We've got a report of erratic behavior at the East Ridge rest stop. Caller says there's blood, lots of it, and strange movement near the vending machines. Can you check it out? 10-4, I responded, frowning beneath my visor. ETA, 7 minutes. I pulled off the main drag and headed toward East Ridge. A lonely rest stop with busted lights, 2 old vending machines, and a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 90s. A place where people only stopped if they had no other choice. As I approached, I noticed the first thing that felt wrong. No cars, not a single one. Usually, there's at least a beat-up sedan or a delivery truck. But this time, it was just the breeze whistling through the dying trees and the crunch of gravel under my tires. I killed the engine and stepped off the bike. My boots echoed on the cracked pavement as I walked toward the building. That's when I saw the streaks. Long, jagged smears of red leading from the vending machines toward the restroom. I keyed the radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 3-1. I've got visual signs of a disturbance, no people in sight. Investigating further. A pause, then. Copy that, 3-1. Back up en route. Closest unit is 10 minutes out. I drew my sidearm, keeping it low, and approached the vending machines. One of them was shattered. Candy bars and chips littered the ground, some crushed, others torn open like someone had tried to eat them in a frenzy. That's when I heard the sound. A soft gurgling, like someone trying to breathe through water. It was coming from the bathroom. I should have waited for backup. Every instinct screamed at me to hold position, but I didn't. I pushed the bathroom door open. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered violently, casting jerky shadows on the tiled walls. A man sat slumped against the far stall, his face pale and wet with sweat, shirt soaked through with something dark. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. I stepped in, gun still lowered. "Sir, I'm Officer Brennan. Can you hear me?" He looked up slowly. His eyes were bloodshot, pupils pinpricks. He opened his mouth to speak, but all that came out was a choking gasp. Then he convulsed. I rushed forward, trying to keep him from hitting the floor, but as soon as I touched him, his eyes snapped open and he lunged. I barely pulled away in time. He snapped his teeth, grabbing at my vest like a wild animal. I stumbled backward, slamming into the doorframe. My hand tightened on the grip of my pistol. "Stop!" I shouted. But he didn't stop. He came at me again, flailing like something broken. I fired once, aiming low, trying to stop him without going lethal. The shot hit his leg, but he didn't even slow down. He tackled me. We crashed against the sink, and my radio crackled on impact. "NIT 3-1. Status?" I jammed my elbow into his neck, forcing him back just long enough to push him off. He hit the wall and slumped. I scrambled to my feet, breathing hard, gun trained on him the entire time, but he didn't get back up. He just twitched. My hands shook as I grabbed my radio. Dispatch, officer attacked, subject is not responding normally. Need medical and backup now. 10, 4, 3, 1. EMS and units en route. Hold tight. I didn't even know how to describe what I'd just seen. That wasn't normal. That wasn't a drunk or someone on bad substances. That was something else. And when I stepped out of the bathroom, I realized it was just the beginning. Out past the tree line, through the rising morning mist, I saw shapes moving. Dozens of them. Shuffling, dragging, twitching, like they were learning how to walk all over again. They were about 30 yards out, moving with this eerie stop-start rhythm, like puppets with tangled strings. I couldn't make out details, not yet, but something about the way they staggered sent a jolt straight through my spine. I've seen my share of intoxicated people, of confused wanderers out near the woods, but this was different. I backed away toward my bike, every instinct screaming for distance. The one I'd left in the bathroom. He wasn't unconscious anymore. I heard him scraping against the tile, that same wet, gargling sound echoing through the doorway behind me. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't isolated to one person. I holstered my weapon, jumped on my bike, and fired up the engine. That familiar rumble roared to life, and for a moment it grounded me. Steel, speed, and power between my legs. It reminded me who I was, what I was trained for. But as I gunned it onto the main road and peeled away from the rest stop, I couldn't shake the image of those staggering forms melting out of the mist. My radio crackled. Unit 3, 1, be advised, reports coming in from multiple locations. Individuals attacking motorists on Highway 9 and residential blocks east of the river. EMS is overwhelmed. Possible. Static. Containment underway. Proceed with caution. Containment? That wasn't a word they used lightly. I took a hard turn back toward the city, planning to regroup at the substation, maybe meet up with other officers. But as I crested the hill overlooking the highway interchange, I slammed the brakes. A pileup stretched across all 4 lanes. Dozens of cars. Some had collided head-on. Others looked like they'd just been abandoned mid-drive, doors open, lights flashing. The smell of burning oil and rubber hit me even from a distance. And in the middle of it all, movement. Figures, weaving between vehicles. Some crawling, others standing but hunched. I saw someone dragging a broken leg but still moving forward like it didn't matter. Like pain wasn't a factor anymore. One of them noticed me. Its head jerked unnaturally, locking eyes with mine from across the wreckage. It started moving faster, like a switch had flipped. Then another turned. Then 5 more. I didn't wait. Throttle wide open, I cut across the median and turned towards the service roads that crisscrossed the outskirts. I couldn't take the main routes. Whatever had started was spreading too fast. This wasn't a chemical leak. This wasn't a bad trip. This was something primal. Something wrong. As I sped past fields and shuttered gas stations, I saw signs of chaos catching up with the rural areas. Doors ajar, animals running free, curtains fluttering in windows that should have been locked up tight. I needed to check on someone who might have answers. Doc Halverson. He wasn't a real doctor anymore, at least not officially, but he'd served in medical response during some serious disasters. He was the kind of guy who understood people at their breaking point and how to spot patterns before they became problems. His cabin wasn't far, tucked behind an overgrown orchard about 15 minutes west of my current position. I hit the siren, more out of instinct than necessity, and made the turnoff toward the tree-lined dirt path that led to his place. That's when I saw the first one up close. She stepped into the road like she didn't even know where she was. Torn flannel shirt, one bare foot, mouth half open. Her skin was pale, almost gray, with dark blotches blooming beneath the surface like bruises. Her eyes, vacant. No spark, just hunger. I slowed for a second. My brain hadn't caught up to what my eyes were screaming. She lunged, not stumbled, lunged. I veered hard, just missing her as she clawed at the air behind me. In my mirror, I watched as she hit the ground, rolled, and, without hesitation, started crawling after me on all fours. What kind of person moves like that after getting slammed by a full-body roll? It wasn't human behavior. It wasn't natural. I reached Doc's place just as the sun broke fully over the horizon, throwing gold and blood-red light across the treetops. I pulled into the gravel clearing, heart pounding like a war drum, and ran to the porch. The front door was wide open. "Doc," I called out, drawing my weapon. "It's Brennan. You here?" No answer. Inside, the place looked mostly intact. A few things knocked over, some broken glass near the kitchen, and on the wall, taped notes, photos, old maps of the region. Halverson had been tracking something. I stepped closer, squinting at a hand-scribbled note under a pinned headline that read, "Local lab reports strange illness among wildlife." The note beneath it said, "Spreads faster than normal. No immune response. Neurological hijack?" Another line, circled twice. "If this crosses species lines, we're in trouble." The floor creaked behind me. I turned, weapon raised, ready to shoot. But it wasn't one of them. It was Doc. Or at least, what was left of him. He stood there in his bathrobe, eyes glassy, skin pale. His face was slack, like his muscles had given up on holding expressions. In one hand he held a blood-covered notepad, in the other, nothing. Just twitching fingers. "Doc?" I asked, backing away slowly. He didn't answer. He stepped forward, dragging one leg. The thing about being a motorcycle cop, you learn to think fast and move faster. I didn't wait to ask questions. I bolted for the back door, kicked it open, and dove off the porch just as he lunged toward where I'd been standing. I rolled, sprang to my feet, and ran for the woods. Behind me, I heard him fall, then get back up. There was no helping him. Whatever was happening, it had already taken him. I ran through the woods, branches clawing at my arms, the undergrowth trying to trip me with every step. Behind me, I could still hear him. Doc Halverson, his feet dragging, limbs swiping at nothing, as if he was still reaching for help he didn't even know he needed. It took everything I had not to turn back. But I couldn't help someone who wasn't there anymore. When I broke through the tree line and reached my bike, I slammed the starter and twisted the throttle like my life depended on it, because by then, I knew it did. The engine roared to life and I sped down the gravel drive, not daring to look back. I didn't know where I was heading anymore, only that I couldn't stop, not yet. Back on the main road, my radio buzzed in and out with static. Every now and then I'd catch fragments of chatter, units overwhelmed, hospitals shutting down, checkpoints forming. The emergency net was clogged, voices overlapping with shouts and panic. No one had a clear handle on what this thing was, and worse, no one knew how fast it was spreading. By 9:15 a.m., it was chaos. I passed a local farm on my way east, barn doors flung open, livestock scattered, fences torn through like something had barreled straight through them. I saw a pickup truck jam sideways into a ditch, its windshield smashed, and the driver's door wide open with no one inside. Just a long, wide smear in the mud leading into the woods. The town was less than 10 miles ahead. a little place called Fairstead. Population, maybe 2,000. I figured they'd either be locked down or completely overwhelmed. I had friends there. An old high school buddy who ran the gas station. A retired officer who volunteered at the school. People who didn't deserve this. I reached the edge of town around 9:40. That's when I realized we were past the tipping point. Sirens wailed from multiple directions. Smoke curled into the sky from at least 2 buildings. One looked like the town library, the other was the diner. A group of people ran across the main road just ahead of me, one of them limping heavily. I slowed and called out, "Hey, you okay?" One of them turned. A woman, middle-aged, covered in dust and what looked like ash. She screamed, "Don't stop! They're everywhere!" Then I saw what she meant. A crowd rounded the corner from behind the pharmacy, stumbling fast, too fast for the state they were in. Their skin looked wrong, patchy, torn in places, dark with bruises or burns. And their mouths, every single one of them had their mouths open like they were mid-scream, but no sound came out. Just that awful, gasping, raspy sound I'd heard at the rest stop. The group the woman was with didn't stand a chance. The crowd behind them overtook them in seconds. I should have sped off, but I didn't. I wheeled around, popped the kickstand, and fired 2 warning shots into the air. It wasn't to scare the ones chasing, it was to draw them toward me. And it worked. Half of them peeled off toward the sound, lurching and charging. I kicked the bike into gear and roared past them, swerving close enough to draw even more attention away from the survivors. They followed me. Full sprint. I've never seen anything move like that. It was unnatural. They weren't worried about balance or pain. Some of them tripped, fell, got back up without hesitation, like they didn't even register the damage they were doing to themselves. I led them to the town's industrial yard, where I knew the roads narrowed into a dead end near the old metal plant. I dipped through the fence and slammed a rolling gate shut behind me. It wouldn't hold forever, but I only needed a few seconds. I gunned it again and took a shortcut I remembered from years ago, cutting through a narrow alley between 2 storage sheds and launching off the other side onto a gravel path. When I looked back, the fence was already shaking from their pounding fists and flailing limbs. I left them there, for now. I reached the gas station on the north end of town, my buddy Kyle's place. It was eerily quiet. I slowed and coasted to a stop, engine idling. The storefront windows were cracked but intact. The lights inside were flickering. I stepped off, unholstered my sidearm, and moved cautiously up to the door. I knocked once, then twice. No answer. I tried the handle, unlocked. "Hello?" I called softly. "It's Officer Brennan. Anyone in here?" A low groan answered me. I raised my weapon, pushing the door open slowly. The place was a mess. Snack racks overturned, shelves knocked over. A smear of red curved along the tile floor toward the back. My boots crunched over broken glass as I followed the trail. I found him in the storeroom. Kyle. He was sitting against the freezer unit, a wrench clutched in one hand, blood all over his shirt. His eyes were still alert, but tired. Haunted. "Brennan," he rasped. "Is it really you?" I nodded, holstering my sidearm. "Yeah, it's me. You okay?" He gave a weak laugh. "Define okay." I crouched beside him, checking his side. He wasn't bitten, at least not that I could see, just bruised and scraped. "What happened?" "They came in like a wave," he whispered. "People I knew, neighbors, customers, all of them. Wrong. They weren't speaking, just moving, tearing things apart." "How many?" "Too many. I tried locking up, but they got through the glass. I hit a couple of them with that." He nodded toward the wrench. didn't slow them down much. I looked at him. You didn't get scratched, bitten? No, I was lucky, hid in here when they went for the guy next to me. He looked away. I helped him up and led him back toward the front. We needed to get out of town, find higher ground, somewhere we could regroup and plan next moves. What is this, Brennan? He asked as we stepped into the daylight. I don't know, I said, but it's not just here, it's everywhere. And deep down, I knew it had only just begun. Kyle sat behind me on the bike, arms wrapped tight around my waist. We didn't speak much, we couldn't. The wind and engine noise drowned out most of it, and honestly, there wasn't anything left to say. Not yet. Every second we were still breathing felt like something borrowed from a time before everything changed. I took the old state highway out of Fairstead, avoiding the main roads completely. I'd seen what was waiting on those, a buffet line of wrecked cars, overturned emergency vehicles, and people who didn't stay down. The further we got from town, the quieter it became. No more screaming, no more sirens. Just the steady thrum of tires on cracked pavement and the wind rushing past. By 10:15 a.m., we were about 20 miles from town, and for a little while, it almost felt like we were outpacing it. Then we reached the overpass. There were bodies. Not moving, thank heaven. At least, not anymore. Lined up like someone had tried to make a stand there. Maybe a police checkpoint, maybe National Guard. The vehicles were marked. Tactical gear was scattered across the ground, some of it bloodied, some torn clean in half. The worst part wasn't the scene. It was the silence. Like whatever had happened here had burned itself out hours ago, too fast. I stopped the bike. Kyle didn't speak. He just looked around, eyes scanning everything like he was still trying to wake up from the worst dream of his life. I got off, drew my weapon and crept forward. One of the Humvees had its door open, keys still in the ignition. A radio buzzed quietly inside with static and broken transmissions. I leaned in, trying to make sense of the garbled voices. Repeating, Zone Red has collapsed. If you're receiving this, avoid Highway 34 and all adjacent sectors. Report to fallback point Bravo 6 at static by noon. After that, we close the line. Bravo 6. It rang a bell, an old emergency response station out near the quarries, used mostly for fire control, but it had hardened buildings and stocked supplies. They were using it as a fallback point. I snapped the radio out of the Humvee and shoved it into my satchel. We've got somewhere to go, I said, hopping back on the bike. Hold tight. We rode hard. I could feel Kyle's grip tighten every time we passed a wreck, a still figure or a shadow that didn't quite move right. But we didn't stop, not for anything. We were running out of time. At 10:50, we reached the edge of the quarry zone. The road split in two, one way leading toward the industrial yard, the other deeper into the hills. According to the map I remembered, the Bravo 6 station was about a mile up the hill, tucked behind a ridge. That's when I saw them again. 3 figures. Standing in the middle of the road, heads tilted at impossible angles, arms limp by their sides. One of them took a step, and then the others moved too. I accelerated, swerving hard to avoid them, but even before we passed, one of them lashed out at the bike like it sensed us more than saw us. It missed, but just barely. We were halfway up the hill when I heard it. Gunfire. Sharp, controlled, not panic fire. Trained hands. I followed the sound. The station came into view through the trees. Low cement buildings surrounded by a chain-link fence. A few armored trucks were parked outside, and figures in tactical gear were moving with purpose. I hit the brakes and held up both hands. Kyle did the same behind me. "Don't shoot," I yelled. "We're clean." Just looking for shelter." For a long second, no one moved. Then a figure raised a hand and signaled us forward. We rolled up slow. A tall man with a vest and headset stepped out to meet us. He wasn't military, private security, maybe contractor type. His eyes were tired but sharp. "You weren't bit?" he asked flatly. "No," I said, "just lucky. Got clear before Fairstead fell." He looked us both over, then nodded. "Inside. Keep your hands where we can see them." We parked the bike and they led us into the main building. It was like stepping into another world. Clean floors, stocked supplies, people with weapons who knew how to use them. A few civilians huddled in one corner. Most were pale, wide-eyed, clutching each other like they were afraid to even blink. "We've got until noon," the man said. "Then the airspace closes, and we're on our own." "Noon?" I asked. "What happens at noon?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward a whiteboard that someone had scrawled a map on. Red X's marked nearly every town within a 50-mile radius. One circle remained, ours. This is the last confirmed green zone. After this, it's all downhill. Kyle sat down hard against a wall, burying his face in his hands. I leaned against a folding table, staring at the map. "What are they?" I asked quietly. The man looked at me. "We don't know, but it spreads fast. No fever, no warning. You see someone act strange. Chances are they're already gone. The ones who turn, they don't stop. They don't slow down. And they don't die easy." He paused. "You ever see someone you knew get taken?" I nodded. "My doc. Good man." He sighed. "Yeah, that's the hardest part, watching someone you know just disappear, and there's nothing you can do about it." We stood in silence for a while. Outside, another burst of gunfire echoed through the hills. The clock read 11:18 a.m., 42 minutes until whatever this place had left would vanish into the smoke like the rest. At 11:20 a.m., the ground started to shake. Not from an earthquake. This was different. Rhythmic, heavy, like something massive moving across the landscape in pieces. Every few seconds there'd be another tremor, followed by a distant thump, then silence. Then another. Everyone in the Bravo 6 station froze. The private security guy, Callahan, I'd learned, rushed to the perimeter monitors. A few others followed, all scanning the nearby hills through mounted cameras. "What is that?" I asked. Callahan didn't answer. He just leaned closer to the screen and adjusted a knob. Then he cursed under his breath. I moved up beside him and saw it. Coming through the trees, maybe half a mile out, was a group. Dozens of them. They weren't walking. They were sprinting. Shoulders knocking trees out of the way, arms swinging wildly, jaws wide, like the ones I'd seen in Fairstead, only faster, hungrier. I'd been around long enough to know what a coordinated breach looked like. This wasn't just a group of random infected. This was a swarm. "We've got 10 minutes, Callahan said, straightening, maybe less." "Thought this place was secure," one of the civilians blurted. "It is," Callahan replied, "but nothing's perfect." People started shouting. Some wanted to leave, others wanted to hide. But the truth settled on all of us like a cold wind. We weren't getting rescued. This wasn't a checkpoint. It was a final stop. I turned to Kyle. He was pale but steady, shaken but not broken. "You holding up?" He nodded slowly. "What do we do?" "We ride," I said. He blinked. "Through that?" "Better than staying here when the fence falls." I looked at Callahan. "You got another bike? Something fast?" He glanced at one of his men, who nodded and ran out toward the vehicle shed. Moments later, they rolled out a second patrol motorcycle. Same make as mine, stripped down, quick, built for maneuverability. "Keys are in it," Callahan said. "You've got one shot. Once they're on you, they don't stop." I reached out to shake his hand. "Thanks for the warning." He hesitated for a beat, then shook it. "If you make it out, head west, avoid the cities. High ground is your best friend now." We mounted up. I fired up my bike, the familiar rumble beneath me steadier than my own heartbeat. Kyle climbed onto the second one, and though I could tell he was terrified, he gripped the handlebars with purpose. The fence started to rattle. A split second later, a deafening alarm blared. Motion sensors tripped. Callahan and his crew moved into position, raising rifles, lining up shots. The last thing I heard before we sped out was someone shouting, "Brace!" We tore down the back access road as the first wave hit the fence. The sounds behind us were unholy, metal shrieking, gunfire rattling like a thunderstorm, people shouting over the roar. We didn't look back. We rode. The hills were steep, the terrain uneven, but we stuck to the path, weaving through the trees and dodging fallen branches. I checked my mirrors more than I should have, and each time I half expected to see them right behind us. At 11:37 a.m., we hit the ridgeline. From up there, we could see it all. Smoke rising from every direction, roads littered with overturned cars, towns choked in silence, and down below, what was left of Bravo 6. The perimeter lights flickered once, then went out. "Should have stayed and helped," Kyle muttered. "No," I said. "They knew what they were doing. They gave us a chance. Don't waste it." We took a moment to rest, fueling up from the spare canisters I kept strapped to my saddlebags. There was no time for a meal, no time to breathe. We followed the mountain road west, deeper into rural country. By 11:50 a.m., we crossed a rickety old bridge and entered a dead zone. No signs of life, no sounds. Just empty barns, cold fields, and quiet roads. That's where we found the girl. She stepped out from behind an old church, barefoot and clutching a teddy bear. Maybe 7 years old, dirt on her face and tears streaking through it. She didn't run, didn't scream. She just looked at us like we were ghosts. Kyle was the first to move. He slid off his bike and walked over, kneeling in front of her. "Hey, it's okay, you alone?" She nodded. "Where's your family?" She didn't answer. Kyle looked back at me. Pain etched across his face. "We can't leave her." "I wasn't going to," I said. "But we don't know if—" "She's clean," he said firmly. "Look at her. That's fear, not hunger." I sighed, then nodded. We brought her with us. Kyle let her ride on his bike, holding tight to his waist, her little face pressed against his back like she was trying to disappear into it. Her name was Ellie. That's all we knew, Ellie, and that she hadn't spoken a word since we found her. At 12:02 p.m., we reached a plateau overlooking a dried-out lake bed. I killed the engine and looked back. Nothing. No pursuit, no signs of movement. Just wind. It should have felt like a victory. But it didn't. It felt like the calm between storms, the space between heartbeats. And somewhere, deep down, I could feel it. This wasn't over. Not even close. At 12:15 p.m., the sun was directly overhead, casting harsh light on everything it touched. The sky was too blue. The world was too quiet. And that silence? It was louder than any siren. We were camped on the edge of an abandoned farm, using a collapsed shed as cover. The place was clearly ransacked weeks ago. Supplies gone, doors kicked in, windows shattered. But the rot hadn't fully set in, meaning whatever happened here didn't happen recently. Ellie was curled up inside the shed, still clutching that bear like it held the last bit of safety left in the world. Kyle sat beside her, eyes locked on the horizon. Me? I couldn't sit still. I kept pacing the perimeter, hand on my weapon, eyes scanning the tree line. Every rustle in the brush made me jump. My instincts were screaming at me, telling me something wasn't right. And I was starting to believe them. Around 12:30, we heard it. A low hum in the distance, mechanical, rhythmic, growing louder with each passing second. Kyle stood, his head tilted toward the sound. Plane? No, I said. Too steady, too close. Then we saw it. Coming down the valley road, 3 black vehicles. Military-grade armored wheels, low-profile build, matte finish. They moved with precision, purpose. I motioned Kyle and Ellie back into the shed. The lead vehicle stopped about 20 yards out, the doors opened, and 6 figures stepped out, all wearing matching uniforms. Black-on-black gear, polished masks, 0 insignia. One of them raised a hand. Not a threat, a greeting. Friendly, a voice called out through a filtered speaker. We're running a sweep of the outer perimeter zones. You got tags? Tags? I shouted back, hand still on my sidearm. Verification. Bioscan. Proof you're clean. I glanced at Kyle. We didn't have any tags. We got out of Fairstead, I said, this morning. Haven't been bitten. Haven't been touched. You can check us if you need to. The figures exchanged glances. One of them pulled out a tablet and tapped something. A green light blinked. We'll scan, the leader said. Standard procedure. Step forward one at a time. I didn't like it. Something about this crew didn't feel like standard military. They were too clean, too practiced. No names, no flags. But we didn't have a choice. I stepped forward. The scanner passed over me. Cool air, a faint buzz. Green light. Clear, the lead said. Kyle went next. A green light. Then Ellie. The scanner paused. Flickered red. My stomach dropped. What's that mean? I asked. She's not infected, the lead said quickly. But she's been in close proximity to an event zone recently. High exposure reading. What are you saying? Kyle asked, stepping in front of her. I'm saying she may be a carrier. Or she may not be. It's inconclusive, but we can't risk it. He reached for her. I drew my sidearm. You're not taking her. The lead paused. Tension snapped tight between us like a stretched cable. She's a child, I said. If she turns, I'll handle it. Not you, not your scanners. One of the others raised a weapon, but the lead held up a hand. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded. Your responsibility, but if she shows signs, don't hesitate, understand? I didn't answer. I just holstered my weapon and ushered Ellie back into the shed. They left without another word. Dust curled behind their tires as the vehicles rolled down the road and vanished into the trees. Once they were gone, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. That was too close, Kyle whispered. They weren't here to help, I said. They were here to clean up. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze. We found a few cans of food in the farmhouse, expired but edible. Kyle and I took turns keeping watch while Ellie slept. Around 3:10 p.m., the wind shifted. It brought with it a scent I hadn't smelled since Fairstead, smoke and ash, not from fire. From burning. Someone had torched something big nearby. I climbed the roof of the barn, using my binoculars to scan the horizon. And that's when I saw it. Far to the north, just past a rise of hills, a column of smoke was curling into the sky, thick and dark. Then, through the binoculars, I caught something else. Movement. People. But they weren't running. They were marching. A long, winding line of them, all moving in sync like ants crawling toward a target, their heads down, their arms limp, and behind them, something massive, like a transport vehicle or mobile command unit lumbering forward slowly, almost patiently. It wasn't the infected that chilled me. It was the fact that someone, or something, was organizing them. That wasn't chaos. That was control. I slid down from the roof. "We need to move," I said. Kyle looked up from where he was packing gear. "What did you see?" "A convoy, northbound, with them. But they weren't attacking, they were being led." Kyle frowned. "You think someone's controlling them?" "I think we don't want to find out." By 3:45 p.m., we were on the road again, Ellie secured between us. This time, we stayed off the pavement. We followed deer paths, ATV trails, old utility lines, anything that didn't scream civilization. Because by now, I understood something very clearly. Whatever was happening out there, it wasn't random, and it wasn't over. By 4:15 p.m., we were cutting across a wheat field that hadn't been harvested in years. Tall, golden stalks swayed in the wind, masking the sound of our engines. It was the kind of place that should have felt peaceful. But it didn't. There was something about the silence, unnatural, too complete. Even the birds were gone. Kyle was up ahead. Ellie seated between us now, sandwiched for safety. She clutched that bear like it could stop the world from crumbling. I couldn't blame her. I felt the same about my bike. We crested a hill and spotted a grain silo in the distance. Rusted, old, but still standing. Nearby, a farmhouse, windows boarded up, roof sagging. No vehicles, no lights, no movement. We cut the engines and rolled to a stop. "I'll check it," I said. "Keep her here." I approached slow, sidearm ready. The air smelled of metal and dry rot. When I reached the porch, I knocked 3 times, firm but spaced. Not the kind of knock a raider would make. Nothing. I pushed the door open. It creaked like a horror movie cue, but nothing jumped out at me. Inside, it was dusty, stale, abandoned. The furniture was still in place, though covered in plastic. Old calendars, family photos. It looked like whoever lived here left in a hurry and never came back. I searched every room. No signs of recent use, no blood, no scratches on the walls, no noises. It was clean. Too clean. Still, it was shelter. I waved Kyle in and we brought Ellie inside. She sat on the couch like she'd done it 100 times, feet swinging above the floor. I pulled the blinds. Kyle checked the pantry, some canned beans, powdered milk, stale crackers. Better than nothing. By 4:50 p.m., we had a fire going in the wood stove and a few lamps lit. It actually felt human again, like the world hadn't completely fallen apart. Ellie spoke for the first time. She tugged Kyle's sleeve and whispered, "I don't like the man in the field." Kyle's face went pale. "What man?" She pointed toward the back window. I moved fast, crossing the room and peeking out, but saw nothing. Just wheat, wind, shadows. "There's no one out there," I said softly. Ellie just shook her head. "He's hiding." That night, we slept in shifts. Kyle took the first watch. I curled up on the floor with my jacket for a pillow. Ellie slept between us, the firelight flickering across her face. At some point, I don't know when, I jolted awake. The fire was out, the room was cold, and Kyle was standing at the back window. Frozen. "Something wrong?" I asked, voice low. He didn't turn. I saw him. I got up and crossed to his side, the man. He nodded slowly. Tall, pale, no face. I looked out. Nothing. Just swaying wheat. "You probably nodded off," I said. Dreamt it. Kyle didn't answer. At 5:20 p.m., we heard a soft knock at the front door. 3 taps, just like mine earlier. Every hair on my neck stood up. I pulled Kyle back and motioned for silence. Ellie was awake now, eyes wide. Another knock. Same rhythm, slow, intentional. I moved to the door, staying low, and peered through the slats. Nothing. No one. Just the porch. Then the knock came again. This time from the back door. We scrambled, covering both exits, weapons drawn. Nothing there either. Not a sound, not a footprint, not even a breeze. Ellie whispered, "He's inside." We didn't ask how she knew. We just believed her. We backed into the center of the room, covering all angles. Then the fire lit itself. I swear to this day, there was no fuel, no spark. It just roared back to life. For a moment, I could see something flicker in the reflection on the window. Tall, thin, draped in something that didn't move with the wind. Then it was gone. Like a mirage. Like a warning. At 5:33 p.m., I made the call. "We leave now." Kyle didn't argue. We packed fast, gear, food, Ellie. Back on the bikes within 5 minutes. The moment we crossed the edge of the field, the wind died completely. No rustle, no sound. Only once we hit the road again did the breeze return, like we'd escaped something ancient. Something that didn't belong in the apocalypse, but had woken up because of it. Kyle didn't speak for a long time. Then finally he said, "That wasn't one of them, was it?" "No," I said. "It was something else." We didn't stop again until sunset, when we reached a river crossing with an old ranger cabin tucked into the woods. It wasn't much, but it had locks. We laid low, ate in silence. Ellie fell asleep with her head on my knee. And for the first time since sunrise, I felt something strange. Not fear, not even relief. It was resolve. We'd made it through so much, but the rules had changed. The infected weren't the only threat anymore. Something else had come through when the world broke, and it was watching, waiting. By 6 p.m., we were hunkered down in the old ranger cabin. The river outside babbled like it didn't know the world had ended. There was a cot in the corner, some dusty maps on the wall, and one flashlight that barely held a charge. Kyle sat by the door, crossbow in his lap. Ellie was curled up under a ranger's poncho. And me? I was at the window watching the woods, counting every second like it mattered. Because I'd made a promise to myself. 12 hours. That's all I had to survive. The sun dipped behind the hills around 6:15. Shadows stretched long and thin across the trees. Somewhere in the distance, we heard the cry of something that used to be human, but wasn't anymore. It was moving fast, toward the river, toward us. We doused the fire, sat still, hearts thudding. One infected came through the brush, just one. Its head twitched like it couldn't quite decide where to look. Its skin was bloated, eyes glassy, mouth slack, but it didn't charge. It just listened. Then it turned and vanished back into the trees. That was new. They never just walked away. "What's going on with them?" Kyle whispered. I didn't answer, because I didn't know. At 6:40, we heard voices. Actual human voices, just on the other side of the river. I crawled to the back window and peeked through the slats. 3 people. Dirty, ragged, all carrying makeshift weapons. One had what looked like a flare gun. Another was pulling a cart full of supplies. They weren't infected. But they weren't friendly either. I watched them argue over something, maybe a map. Then one of them pointed across the river. straight at our cabin. We dropped out of sight. Kyle raised his weapon. "You think they saw us?" "Doesn't matter," I said. "We stay quiet, lights out." The river wasn't deep, but it was fast. Crossing it would take time we could use. Or so I thought. They didn't try to cross. Instead, the one with the flare gun aimed it straight up and fired. A single red spark soared into the sky and burst like a signal fire. For a second, I thought they were signaling others. But then the woods behind them answered. The sound was unmistakable. Shrieking, snarling, dozens of them, maybe more. The flare had drawn them in. But they weren't going for the people who fired it. They were heading for us. "They're using the infected," I whispered, "weaponizing them." Kyle's face turned grim. "We've got maybe 3 minutes before they reach this side. 2 if they're already near the bridge." We didn't wait. We woke Ellie, packed in silence, and slipped out the rear door. No engine, no lights. We pushed the bikes through the woods using the river to cover our movement. We weren't fast, but we were quiet. Behind us, the cabin lit up with red glow and screaming. Human, then not. We kept moving. By 7:05 p.m., we'd put half a mile between us and the cabin, but we weren't alone. A shadow moved up ahead, tall, lurching, not fast but deliberate. I raised my weapon. It stopped, then raised its hand, not in attack. In acknowledgement, it knew me. Somehow, it recognized me. I lowered my weapon just for a second. It turned, stepped into the fog, and vanished. "What was that?" Kyle asked, voice thin. "I don't know," I said, but it didn't want to fight. We camped in a tree line by 7:30. The sun had fully set, but the moonlight gave us enough to see by. Ellie finally spoke again. "They're changing," she said softly. "They're learning." Kyle glanced at me. "Who told you that?" I asked. She didn't look at me. She just pointed to the woods, the man with no face. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't even try. At 7:56 p.m., my watch buzzed. Not from the hour, from a preset alarm I'd forgotten I'd set. 12 hours. From the first call to now. I'd made it. We'd made it. But instead of relief, all I felt was dread. Because the first 12 hours? That was the easy part. Now, the real fight was beginning. Not just against the infected, but against the ones pulling the strings behind them. The ones who had a plan. And I was starting to think that plan didn't leave room for survivors. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.